Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of D&D Horror Stories. In today's episode, we have a tale about a player betraying the party for the lulz, a story about a new player demanding that a dungeon master change his world, and much more. But first, here's some Alice to try to get those who aren't yet subscribed to do so, and click that bell for notifications. Thanks, Alice. Now let's get into these stories. I just went through the worst session yesterday, and I'm not happy about it. By Reddit user, Red Dorito Bag. The party consists of me playing a wizard, a cleric, a barbarian, a sorcerer, and an artificer. We were playing an ancient Greece-themed campaign. At this point in the story, our characters were level 7. And we were sailing to and from various islands in order to gain some magic items to help us defeat the BBEG. We stopped at this one island that was dominated by lizard folk, and after rescuing some lizard folk prisoners from the previous island, the queen held a festival in her honor, after which she gave us a quest. Basically, kill the lizard folk king of a rivaling tribe because they had ties to the BBEG. Oh, and their lair was also on top of a large volcano. In order to obtain a better idea as how to sneak inside, our barbarian, who has her own Pegasus, wanted to fly around the area of the volcano to see if there was any safe routes to approach, and the sorcerer told our cleric to ride the Pegasus with her. Keep this tidbit in mind. Eventually, we sneak inside the village, and we try to quietly take out some isolated guards. However, one of the guards manages to alert the rest of the village that there's intruders. We considered running away, but given how capable we were at this point, we felt that there may be a chance against them. At some point during the battle, our barbarian and cleric were swarmed on all sides by these lizard folk, so to take all of these enemies out at once, our sorcerer casted Fireball in this area. He killed all the enemies, but also downed our barbarian and injured the cleric in the process. Now, it's at this moment that shit goes terribly wrong. I Misty Stepped my wizard to the area that the barbarian fell down in, and gave her a healing potion to keep her alive. Out of nowhere, our sorcerer goes asshole apeshit. Now he is targeting his fireballs and attack spells on our barbarian, but also myself as well in the process. Soon, our cleric gets to us and tries to heal the barbarian, but the sorcerer just keeps counterspelling his attempts. But after that, I guess the artificer was getting a kick out of this as well, and also starts attacking us. After a few fireballs and death saves, the barbarian, cleric, and I were dead. D, who played the sorcerer, said that it's what his character would do, and that he had a reason to kill us. Now, what could have possibly caused the sorcerer to randomly resort to unneeded violence against his own teammates in the middle of a battle like a raging quarter-brained 10-year-old? He couldn't ride the Pegasus. Word for word is what he said. I sternly tried pointing out that he was the one that suggested the cleric ride with our barbarian, but it was falling on deaf ears. Sorcerer and artificer player were too busy laughing their asses off. Barbarian player, cleric player, and I were fuming with displeasure and disappointment, and our DM was scrambling to figure out what to do with what was going on, and how to even possibly continue afterwards. I felt bad for our DM the most, honestly. What really got me pissed is when D said to me, when my character was hanging by a literal thread before dying, "Red Dorito Bag, do you want your character to die?" To which I responded, "I don't know, what do you think?" D responds, "Well, I don't know, I'm asking you." And I said back, "Fine, my character dies. You're just gonna try to kill him off later anyways." This player has shown repetitive annoying behavior of trying to kill our characters, harm them, or get us into trouble for his own amusement in previous campaigns as well. After all of that, at the end of the session, D also had the nerve to ask me, "Are you mad at what I did?" At this point, I felt that I didn't need to dignify that for a response, so I just said good night and left. Yeah, this dude sounds like an asshole. And if I was the DM, I would just retcon all of that event and do it over. after setting down some ground rules so these players don't go murder hobo and that guy again. Honestly, if these players have done shit like this in the past, I would just say that PvP is off the table at that point. And if these players don't stop trying to ruin the game for everyone else just for their own amusement, then they have no place at your table. It sounds like OP and the group have a decent campaign going, and shouldn't let a couple of asshats sour the experience. On to the next one. Player quits because my homebrew deities aren't playing proper D&D. By Reddit user Terrace Kagi. So, not a very big or impressive one, but here we go. I was looking for a new player to replace someone who was missing, and after posting up a flyer, yes, I'm old-fashioned, at the local game store, I got a hit. I invited him around before a session to go over the world building, introduce him, etc. One thing to note is, my campaign has run more or less continuously since 1994, and because I didn't know shit about anything back then, my entire world is effectively homebrewed. That includes a homebrew deific cosmology centered around the 3 original gods of life, death, and magic. So I explained in brief the setting, the gods, major organizations, and roughly where the players were to find a good entry point. And Newbie said that he wanted to play a fallen Asimar of the god of death, who was a psychopomp who had been booted out because he exceeded his mandate from guiding the souls of the dead to killing them proactively to save time. Honestly, that kind of weird shit is kind of my jam, so I told him that Kain, the god of death, would indeed have booted him out for that. But we could set up an arc, and he wrote up a redemption paladin, and I honestly thought that would work out fine. Meeting the others went well, both the players and the characters, where he was introduced as having literally just received his divine booting out and was drinking his sorrows away in the bar. He gets along well enough with them, especially our Death Domain cleric, who sympathizes with his plight, and everything is going well, until he introduces himself formally as being a personal servant of the Raven Queen. I remind him that the deity of death in my campaign is not the Raven Queen, and he tells me that canonically, the death deity is the Raven Queen, and that's who he worships. I decide to let it slide until after the session, and talk to him then, only to be told that he doesn't appreciate me undermining his roleplay, and that I should follow the established gods of D&D. When I explained to him, for what feels like the 3rd time, that back when I built the campaign, I literally had a player's handbook from 2nd edition, and so I built everything from scratch. But he told me I could just fix it before the next session. I told him that I wasn't going to, and if this was a deal breaker, he should just leave. He told me I wasn't playing proper D&D, and I tell him that he's probably not the best fit for our group if he feels that way. A few days later, I get a message from the local game store telling me that they've had a complaint about my player wanted flyer, that I'm lying about playing D&D, and that I'm a hostile DM who won't let players play their characters. Edit. Since it's come up a lot, the store manager said that he wasn't there, so he can't take sides, but my flyer is still up, so he's sort of neutral in my favor. So that was my most recent experience with a strange player. Jesus. Can you imagine being so self-entitled to demand a DM that has been building a homebrew world since the 90s, add in gods from the source books? Seriously, the gall of some people. Then to turn around and go tell the game store owner that the DM didn't listen to you. What a child. Moving on. The worst DM I have ever experienced. By Reddit user NoCloud7275. This story happened 2 years ago on Roll20, and is about the worst game and anti-player DM I've ever had. The game started off with the party as slaves aboard a ship. Not a bad start, but the DM had the slavers sell all of our starting equipment, which at level 3 is devastating. We somehow managed to fight our way off the ship, only for our monk to get their leg blown off in the process. Oh yes, see, this DM used this incredibly punishing critical injuries table that had something like a 40% chance of being dismembered if you were crit. Now, this wouldn't have been so bad, as the game was described as roleplay heavy, except the DM either kept throwing combat encounters at us, or made combat the only way to deal with problems. So, we get off the ship to freedom, only to be immediately arrested and made into debt slaves for the crime of not having a passport, and our bounty is set at an exorbitant price of 5,000 gold pieces. Again, we were level 3. To add insult to injury, our characters were fitted with bomb collars around our necks that would explode if we tried to remove them or traveled more than 5 miles away from the city. But don't worry, it's not real slavery, our DM said. Besides, we could also pay off our debt by undertaking these incredibly deadly tasks, which almost certainly would result in death or more dismemberment. Even better, every, and I quite literally mean every NPC the party met, was either a complete asshole and openly rude, hostile, or condescending to the party for no reason, or was having the most horrible, messed up stuff done to them, like being thrown into lava, which the DM laughed as he described, or being lynched in the middle of the street. Not everyone is like this, our DM insisted when we complained. And it's like, when every NPC we met acted like this, then they kind of are. Things came to a head after 5 sessions that made me leave, if everything else already hadn't made me want to. An orphan boy we met, whose parents were just viciously executed in front of him, asked us to escort him to a nearby convent to be raised by the nuns. When we arrived, the DM described us hearing the screaming of a young girl from the basement, but when we inquired about it, the nuns were incredibly vague and just told us not to worry about it. During the night, the orphan wakes up the party and tells us that they have a young tiefling girl held captive in the basement and begs us to go rescue her. We investigate, and the girl is held in a small cell with a force field emanating from an upright staff on the floor. When we try asking the girl why she's imprisoned, she's similarly vague like the nuns and refuses to give us a straight answer. Then, the Mother Superior finds us and only tells us over and over again that the girl's a demon, with no further elaboration, but also that, being a pacifist, she won't stop us if we attempt to free her. We decided to leave well enough alone, which clearly irritated the DM, as he then described the orphan boy removing the staff from the ground and freeing the girl, only for them to both transform into the demon lords of war and tyranny in the setting and teleport away. The Mother Superior is now suddenly all talk, blaming the party and saying it's all our fault, as the DM believed too, that her order broke their oath of pacifism years ago to capture the demon, and that we were now responsible for recapturing them. Looking back, the DM had clearly intended for the party to free the demon and then reveal it to us in an epic twist, gotcha moment. But everything about it was just so contrived and made no sense. Why did the Demon Lord even need us there at all to free his kin? Why couldn't the nuns just be up front in the first place, so we'd leave the girl alone? Why would the nuns be willing to break their vow of pacifism to capture the female Demon Lord, but not to contain her? Why did they have such a crappy prison where literally everyone, let alone another Demon Lord, could just walk in, grab the staff, and free her in a pinch? How in the hell was the nuns failing in their guard our fault? How the hell were a party of level 3s meant to capture 2 Demon Lords? For that matter, how the fuck are we meant to do anything when we were still slaves? This contrived bullshit was the last straw for me, and I left before the next session. Fuck you, Bearfish. Well, I don't know what a bearfish is, but apparently it also pissed off OP. It certainly does seem like that DM had a set railroad that he wanted the players to follow, but when they didn't make the decisions he wanted them to make, he flew by the seat of his pants and showed that he was a pretty inexperienced DM. I think OP may have overreacted a tad, since this DM did seem new. Perhaps he could have given that DM some constructive criticism instead of just leaving outright. Though, that's just my thoughts. And before we move on, if you're enjoying the video, clicking the like button goes a long way to help the channel out, and it also makes Snipsy very happy.
Yes. I really hope they like the video. I really like this string.
I hope they do too, Nipsey. Now, let's get into today's final story. Players started using slurs as soon as the game started. By Reddit user, myjabbadabbadoo. Recently, I wanted to start my own D&D campaign, thus I started posting ads on Discord servers. I found 5 people who wanted to play, and sent them a few rules, like no metagaming. I did not have many ground rules, as I thought we'd lay them as we play along. They all sent me the ideas for their characters, and we had a session 0, so that we could all talk to each other and get to know each other and our characters, as none of the players had talked to each other before. One of them had an Indian accent, while the other one spoke in a gay accent. I don't know how else to describe it. It was the way how gay people usually talk on TV. Everyone took their turn introducing, and then one of the players, Jane, started laughing after just saying hello, and then said, "I'm sorry, it's just funny that an Indian wants to play D&D. She did not seem to understand what she said wrong, and the other players started sending me PMs telling me that I should kick her out, while the Indian guy started saying that it was alright and he didn't mind it. I told Jane that racism wasn't going to be accepted, and she said she didn't mean to be racist, but she should have thought before speaking. 10 minutes after this had happened, she said to the other person that her best friend was gay, and she called him F-slur all the time, and she might slip up out of habit because of the way he was talking. I told Jane that this wasn't acceptable and that she should leave the game. The others agreed, and we kicked her out. She then sent a long homophobic text to the other guy about how she wasn't homophobic, and it was just the way she was. Well, first, I have to say that I'm glad that this story ended when it did, instead of one of those, but I let them play in the hopes that they would shape up, and then paragraphs later of how they didn't shape up. And why did Jane think it was unusual for someone from India to be interested in a fantasy RPG like D&D? I mean, has she seen any of those awesome Bollywood fantasy movies? Then, in regards to warning the gay player that she might slip up and use the F-slur in regards to him, is just horseshit. Personally, I don't let that word bother me, but I know it can affect other people differently. And if Jane didn't have the self-control not to use that word, it just tells me that it is a common one that she uses. Good on OP for nipping this one in the bud from the get-go, and I hope their game is going well. And that's going to do it for today. If you have a story that you would like shared in a video, be sure to post it in the d&Ddoge subreddit, or even contact me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and so does Nipsey.
Yes. Thanks for watching.
Until next time.